Good morning,
Morning.
everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with Equity Chat 2.0, and I've got an incredible guest with us today, Eddy Conroy. Good morning, Eddie. Good to
Good
see you.
morning. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. Everybody, Eddy Conroy is a senior policy manager uh, on the higher education policy team at New America. His work focuses on policy research and development to improve federal higher education policy on accountability, financial aid, basic need support for students, and ways to improve access to higher education for older students, in particular, parenting students, those college students with kids. So currently, Eddy leads and supports work on accreditation issues, parenting students, improving financial aid offers, and regulatory improvements to higher education. We can maybe use just a few of those, don't you think, Eddy?
One or two.
His expertise on various higher education issues has also been featured in the Washington Post, New York Times, ProPublica, and many more. And so it's a thrill and an honor, Eddie, to have you here today on Equity Chat with me. And for those who don't know me, Tammeil Gilkerson, proud Equity Avenger and Chancellor of the Peralta Community College District. So, Eddie, how you feeling this morning?
I am pretty good, minus some bumps and bruises. I'm a mountain biker, and I took a bit of a crash this weekend, so I'm
Oh
a little bit sore. But other than that, I'm
no!
pretty good.
Oh no. Oh my gosh. I love biking. So I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you'll recover, pretty
Yeah,
soon.
I bounce pretty well.
Well, thank goodness. I think as we get older, I hear we're not as like bounceable, but I don't know yet. You're far from being there, so I'm sure. So keep riding. So let's go ahead and jump into the chat. So as you engage in equity focused work, what is your walk-up song or anthem?
Yeah, I struggled with this. I cheated. I picked two. First, partly just because I love Tracy Chapman, is Tracy Chapman talking about a revolution. I feel like
Yes.
it, as a song, it says everything just in general and particularly to this moment. But then, perhaps controversially for someone who grew up in the UK, Yorktown from Hamilton, speaks to overcoming impossible odds, camaraderie, being part of a team that you can really trust in to do hard things, and all the things I think needed in this work, plus the line of immigrants get the job done, will, forever have a place of love in my heart.
Oh my gosh, I love both of those songs and I love the diversity of what you picked too. So I'm a huge fan of both artists, quote unquote, and the work. So we're going to add those to our playlist. It's my favorite question, one of my favorite questions
A
we
good one.
ask.
I had to, it was fun thinking through what I wanted to throw in there, and I had to discard a lot of choices made that were on the cutting room floor.
Well, it's funny because we actually also are we put out at the end of the season, we'll put out our season playlist. So it'll be exciting to have your songs included with the other guests we've had this season. So, um, was there a defining moment or experience that catalyzed your journey to engage in this work, serving and championing first generation students?
Yeah, for the first 6 years or so of my career in higher education, I was a financial aid administrator. So I worked in California for at two different universities, but mostly at UCLA. I ran outreach and communications for UCLA's financial aid office.
Oh, wow.
And so as part of that role, I spent a lot of time in LA high schools doing FAFSA workshops in community colleges around LA, doing events for transfer students, stuff like that. And I one day had two FAFSA events booked at two different high schools in what ended up being what I can only describe as this sort of tale of two cities moment. I had one in the sort of late morning, early afternoon at a East LA high school, and one in the evening at a Manhattan Beach high school, which for folks who are not familiar with LA, East LA, predominantly sort of low income, lots of large number of immigrant families. Spanish is the most frequent first language spoken at home. Manhattan Beach, average family income is almost $200,000 a year, very white neighborhood, two completely sort of polar opposites of what LA can be. And I go to this high school in East LA around lunchtime. The
Yeah.
students are there helping set up a projector, a portable speaker in a bit of the cafeteria that's been cordoned off. And pretty crystal clear I'm probably the only person that's going to be helping give these students any kind of help navigating the financial aid process. It's all students. There are almost no, I don't actually think there were any, but maybe there were a couple of parents there, but primarily students. And then that evening, I go to this high school in Manhattan Beach. I arrive, get ushered into this huge 300-seater auditorium. Their professional sound guy mics me up, and I speak to an audience almost entirely made up of parents. But the thing I sort of will never forget that has sat with me ever since is somebody standing up and asking, a question that was more of a comment of, it's really unfair that I make $400,000 a year and my kids aren't going to get any help paying for college from a UC school, and generally a complaint. And, college is expensive, but it was this moment of those students in the East LA high school were pretty much all first gen. Knowing the profile of the school, they were so eager for the help and support. And it was just so clear that the path they were going to have to walk was going to be so much more challenging and so much tougher than the students coming from the Manhattan Beach High School. And it was just this moment of, I want to be able to do things so that the students coming from an East LA high school and from high schools like it around the country have just as good a shot at getting into and succeeding in college as students from places like Manhattan Beach. It shouldn't be
Yes.
that, anybody's getting a massive leg up here, but it should be that whether you come from East LA or Manhattan Beach, you've got a good chance of getting into and succeeding in college.
Absolutely. I love that, Eddie. And honestly, like we have some shared. So my first job in college as a first generation college student was in the financial aid office at UC
Oh, I didn't know
Berkeley. And
that.
so I've been, I have a lot of shared passion as you about
Yeah.
sort of access and the ability. So, thank you for sharing that. I think it's illustrative of the work that you've been doing. And so I can see that through line. So really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, if you could achieve one breakthrough in racial equity that would have the most significant impact on student success, what would it be?
So I think because I have this interesting combination of a comms background and financial aid, I think I think in terms of how do we improve how we talk about these things and how people understand them as part of my work a lot. And so what I would love to achieve or see is an understanding from more white folks that first gen students, Black students, Native students, Latino students, all students of color getting an equal chance to succeed and thrive, not only survive, does not mean less for white folks and for their children. And in fact, many of the changes we want to see in the world when it comes to higher education help white students who are first
Exactly.
generation coming from low income families as much as they help students of color. But I think we've seen, sadly as ever, politicians keen to divide and advance an agenda, constantly selling the idea that it doesn't matter if you're downtrodden, so long as your face is just a little less in the mud than people who look differently from you. And so
Right.
changing that perception could do so much for making it easier to build the sort of political capital, the policy capital needed to change things so that we get supports to all of the students who need support to succeed.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. And I think the way you've sort of situated your work and seen how important that is really it makes me more excited about having you on and just knowing that you're in this space and sphere. So, to do this work, we must continue learning and partnering with others. How do you educate yourself, and who is informing your practice?
Yeah, I suspect, like many, if not most people who do this kind of work, just so much reading. I've finally been reading Evicted by Matthew Desmond,
Oh,
partly because we've got
it's a
new
good
work
book.
coming out in a few weeks in conjunction with Princeton Eviction Lab on how eviction risk harms student success. So, learning from that and working with um, Nick Grates, who's an assistant professor at University of Minnesota and an eviction lab researcher who we partnered with this on, has been a wonderful learning journey of a book that came out quite a long time ago.
Yes,
And yeah, it's a hard read, but it is a worthwhile read to push through. And then
absolutely.
yeah, and then just people that I've been fortunate enough who've become colleagues and friends and mentors, people like Chris Nellum, who leads Ed Trust West, and Sujin Jez, who leads Cal Competes.
Uh-huh.
And then, Zakiya Smith Ellis, who I'm really fortunate to be able to sort of learn from on a regular basis. Carrie Welton, who was until recently at TICAS, who just has an incredible way of connecting her lived experience to the policy and anti-poverty work. Dominique Baker, who's a professor in Delaware, who I'm really lucky to have as a friend and a colleague, and has done great work about how the media talks about student loans and the sort of racialized language that gets used there. And then I would be remiss without talking about somebody like Tressie McMillan Cottom, since reading Lower Ed was really one of the things that inspired me to move from working at an institutional level to wanting to work on the federal policy side of things to try and enact change there. And then finally, just I have this amazing team that I get to lead on our parenting students work with some really wonderful sort of young up and coming policy researchers, Eba Obatuase and Richard Davis Jr., and then just a tiny bit younger, but still amazing. Sorry, not a bit, mean to say, not quite as young, but equally amazing, Stephanie Baker, who was at Benefits Data Trust for a long time and brings this incredible knowledge about the sort of ins and outs of practically helping students access public supports and getting to learn from, as I'm sure you find with your team, with
Yes.
people who are coming in with a fresh perspective, who are early in their careers, who want to test out new ideas. It's a wonderful opportunity to get to learn from all of them every week.
Yeah, I always tell people that the learning, like as leaders and as like change makers and those things, learning has to be central for all of us so that we can make sure
Yeah,
that we really aren't staying stagnant in our ideas and know these things. And I love this idea around, universal design and how you're really thinking about the communication part around financial aid, but also this other work. So we're going to have you come back when your research is published.
I'd love to.
Because it'd be really great to have you on the podcast to talk about it further because that work was so seminal for me in the work here in the Bay Area. And I know, I'm sure looking at that as it impacts student success and basic needs and all those things is going to be really important to the work we do.
I'll make sure you get a copy as soon as it comes out in a few weeks.
Yay, I'm very excited. So we all have a vision for the future, Eddie, that we want to live in. What is your freedom dream for higher education, and what gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, my continued vision there is it's not unique, but it is to see free public higher education. We're starting to get this in the community college space in different states. And I really continue to strongly believe that it's the tide that lifts all students who need support going to college, levels the playing field. It has that simplicity of communication aspect that, when I was at UCLA, where if you are coming from a low impact income background, it can be very inexpensive or free, but it is this case of if you get into UCLA, it will be free if A, B, C, D, and F boxes get checked. It's this very trying to communicate that clearly and succinctly to first gen students who don't have somebody else to talk to about the college process can be really challenging. And I think it also fits with what we see. New America does a lot of public opinion work. So my
Hmm.
colleagues, Sophie Nguyen and Rachel Fishman, who lead that public opinion work, we do an annual survey called Varying Degrees. When they ask people whether they think college is worth it for a friend or family member, what kind of level of education does somebody in your family or one of your close friends need to succeed, rather than just sort of generic questions about should people go to college, see overwhelming support for people who want their family members to get some kind of post-secondary education because they see the value, they see the need
Hmm.
for, economic security, success. And, there's obviously work to be done on the affordability side, but I think if we can do more to, if you have something like free college, you can channel into that everybody wants the people closest to them to be able to access higher education. And it's about making that argument that access at an even playing field for everybody. It takes away those sort of tale of two cities disparities of did you
Yeah.
grow up in Manhattan Beach in a pretty affluent family, or did you grow up in
Yes.
East LA in a lower income family where mom and dad didn't speak English and you were the person who like translated the English speaking world for your family and had to navigate
Yes.
that by yourself.
Hmm. I love that, Eddie. Sign me up. I'm on board. I'm with you. I'm like, let's go. Let's
We're
do it.
trying.
We're trying. Well, that's what it is, right? It's these thoughtful people together doing both, right?
Yeah.
Practitioner support, policy support, working at multiple ends to do this. So I really appreciated the time talking today, Eddie. Thanks for this little
Same.
snippet. And I look forward to opportunities for us to talk more in depth soon. So, everybody, thanks so much for joining this session of Equity Chat. I want to remind you to visit equityavengers.com where you can find our podcast, Equity Avengers Assemble, and sign up to get on our newsletter. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn, X, and Blue Sky. So, have a wonderful rest of the day. And thanks again, Eddie. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tamil. Bye now.
Bye.